So Rich, welcome to the podcast, Mastery and Mindset. We're talking about entrepreneurship, investing, sports, media. We go deep into those topics. And as you, as the top of the industry in the media, I would love to talk about Complex, about the whole journey, how you sold it for 300 million, two
Twice.
times, right?
Thank you.
The whole strategy behind it. So first of all, thank you for being here. We're sitting here at your beautiful house, so appreciate that.
Thank you very much, sir.
But yeah, if we can go back to the beginning,
Yep.
if you can introduce yourself and
Sure.
let the people know who you are, if they maybe already don't know you, but yeah.
Well, you know what? We're kind of a hidden secret. That's the beautiful part about Complex. I mean, everybody knows Complex, but a lot of people don't really know the story.
Yeah.
So, but it starts very humbly, right? I'm a Brooklyn kid,
Yeah.
public schools. And again, I think what's funny about Brooklyn, and I think it's an important point to make, the delineation is, there is a ton of very gritty, very successful creatives and entrepreneurs that have come out of Brooklyn. What I always like to say is usually those are the ones, they tended to be at a higher batting average of likelihood of success because they're doing it out of necessity, not privilege.
Yeah.
And I'm not taking anything away from other people who want to go and be an entrepreneur, but it's a lot harder when you don't have a net 1 inch below your ass,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a very different story.
Yeah.
So, public school kid, State University, Binghamton, double major in finance and marketing. Came out, worked at Saatchi & Saatchi, worked on their flagship brand, made nothing. Literally, I was making $262.38 a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember the math, by the way. You don't forget those numbers.
No.
Because when they get really, really big, you start going, all right, did I make that in a day? Did I make it in an hour? Did I make it in a minute? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I never got to that point, but, well, for a year or two, but not over the course of a big span of time.
Yeah.
But Saatchi & Saatchi, very grinding it out in media on some flagship brands, learned a ton, transitioned. I was told very quickly, you are not a media person. So I had someone help me a ton.
All right.
They're like, you are, no shots at agency people and media people,
Yeah.
but they were like, you can do a great deal more. You can open up the aperture. Helped me get a very high profile sales job at Winter Media, Rolling Stone, Men's Journal, Us Magazine.
Yeah.
Unbelievable experience there as well. Like big brands, right? Like monster brands that we kind of sold well above our weight, well above the reach and scale. And why those things are important is that set me up to go and work at National Geographic, right? A big global brand.
Yeah, for sure.
And launch something new. So it was an entrepreneurial play.
Yeah.
So basically, I got to be an entrepreneur with training wheels.
That's cool.
Right? You have the overhang of corporate, the support of corporate from both from an audience perspective, a brand basis, and expenditures.
Yeah.
Right? So got to do the entrepreneurial thing, had a wildly successful launch of Adventure magazine. And then I met Mark and Seth from Echo, and we screamed at each other. I'll do the truncated version. We met each other, screamed at each other about concentric circles and niche verticals becoming the most influential topics in the world.
Yeah. And
we ended up figuring out that we should work together and launch Complex magazine. Amazing ride. We went from a magazine to a digital ad network to a IP factory to a brand business to an events play, from short form, from text to photo to short form video to long form video. I mean, we had, even though I was there for 20 years, we were probably about 7 different businesses with the amount of iteration and innovation, and sold the business for the first time to a JV of Verizon and Hearst in July of 16. And then during COVID, we continued to actually grow because we iterated the business a ton to online. We even converted like Complex Con, which was our biggest in real life thing, to Complex Land, which was really one of the first 3D, real life cons that were put together just online.
Yeah.
And all of those things allowed us to sell the business the second time. We merged with BuzzFeed, went public on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day of 2021. And then I have exited the business.
It's
a long story. Sorry, I put a lot in a very short period
Exactly,
of time.
because we have so much great things what you mentioned
Let's unpack
here.
it.
Yeah, let's unpack it. Let's go back. Right, you started from Brooklyn, working in the corporate world. Like myself, actually, I also work for Vodafone, Sony. So I think that experience is worth a lot. That's how I see, but I would love to get your perspective.
So I think nowadays too many kids look at this, it's like that's looked at as selling out, right? And I think it's the opposite, personally. If I didn't have that level of experience, by the time I became an entrepreneur, like I'd kind of been there, done it, but I didn't do it without the, like, you know how you, like how a trapeze person practices, I'll make the net reference again, slightly different, is they practice with a net, right? And then when the show comes on, they pull the net. So, but even the best people in the world practice with a net. So if you have an opportunity to learn from some of the most dynamic companies in the world,
100%.
Why would you not take that opportunity, then be a sponge, make some good money, get a lot more management experience as well, managing people, and then launch something. That's the way I look at it.
No, I totally agree. Because what I mentioned, I also started in the corporate world, worked for Vodafone 6 years, then Sony, then T-Mobile. But for
you work for gigantic global companies. Like, easy to get lost in.
But it's huge.
But if you are able to make your way through that and break through, you're gonna be a successful person.
And just some basic knowledge, what maybe not just common for people who just finished a study or graduated and then go directly into entrepreneurship. There's nothing wrong with that, don't take me wrong, but I think what I learned during that journey and get those trainings and just basic stuff what you learn in the corporate world and work with those amazing smart people around you, like you did, I think that's right.
Like, look, you know, there's a phrase called "not ready for prime time." What people don't understand is, like, Mark Zuckerberg is an aberration of aberrations, right? Like, they hear stories like that, and it's like, well, he didn't even finish college, and you know, whatever. And I'm not saying people can't do that, but do you know how smart Mark Zuckerberg was? How differentiated of a product he had? How lucky he was to meet some very smart people like Peter Thiel and other things that walked him around to excel and other, like that. For all of that to happen, for it to work, meeting Cheryl,
100%.
Making that move, like these. It's hard building a business in general from an entrepreneurial perspective. Maybe you have a 5% chance. I like batting averages increased. So instead of trying to become the anomaly of anomalies, take that 5% and just absolutely figure out how to increase the likelihood as much as absolutely possible. That's the way I look at it. It's math.
I love that. If you look back at that corporate journey, what were the things, what you learned, what you used in your entrepreneurial journey, or just what are those key things?
You know what's funny about that? And now I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. But what's funny is I got comfortable making my own decisions. So basically, I look at my corporate experience as pushing me from a thought process development basis, but then also, honestly, I hate to say this, learning what not to do in a lot of ways, right?
Sure,
so it's a combination of those two things, right? And I think building that level of confidence, to me, was the other benefit, because I was not ready, coming from where I came from, and when, like, so I graduated in '93 from college. Like, the internet was not exactly robustly filled with how to launch a business, what venture capital was. By the way, venture capital was much more nascent, right? So the world was different. If I had started something, I will tell you right now, I would have given myself almost zero chance to win.
Oh, wow. This is big.
100%. Like, I was not ready for prime time. I'm not saying other people. I'm talking about myself.
How many years did you work in the corporate?
So from 21, I was 21 years old till 29.
All right. And what?
And that was, and you got to remember, Those were at 3 very large scale, very focused, top-notch, groundbreaking places, all on a relative basis to the industry.
Huge brands,
Yep.
the biggest clients.
Best in the world.
So when did you decided to take the entrepreneurial leap and meeting your business partner? How can you describe that in more detail?
That's a funny story.
Yeah.
That's more, you got to have a little luck in this whole game too, right?
For sure.
So I told you, the launching Adventure at Nat Geo was the entrepreneurial thing, right?
Yeah.
Got addicted. Like, I'm like, wow, you get to build your own narrative. You're not taking what is already existing and repackaging it. You're building the narrative, you're building the positioning, you're building the team, you're building the revenue, you're building the audience. Like, to me, I know that's daunting for a lot of people. That would paralyze a lot of people. I looked at that as I could craft it in my own eyes, and if I'm gonna be selling it, and when I say selling it, I mean selling it to the advertisers, selling it to the brands, selling it to the PR, selling it to investors, selling it across the board, right? Because all of those aspects are often competing with one another.
Yeah.
And my viewpoint is if I have control over how we're packaging those things, each of them can be considered from the front rather than trying to reverse engineer what the narrative needs to be after something has already been built. And that's what I found attractive.
Yeah, and were you free as an entrepreneur to do everything what you want? Because sometimes I hear those stories as an entrepreneur, but they are not really. Do you know what I mean?
So,
an entrepreneur is still you get what I'm saying, right?
No.
And did you have the power to also make your own decisions, or how did that work?
So I was very lucky. I had a couple of, I had a boss, a publisher at Nat Geo that was exceptionally trusting and giving of my ability. Literally, he was kind of like, you know the term, like you got to find your rabbi? He was my rabbi, this guy Chris Sachs.
Awesome.
He was just like, dude, you get this, and you get it a lot better than I do. And I mean, I never heard a very senior person say that before, like to that degree. When someone's like, he's like, Rich, what do you want to do? How do you think about it? Like, and I don't mean one-offs. I mean, no matter the meeting, whether it was up or down or at the board level when we were flying down to Washington, you know, he was kind of like, dude, what do you think? And how do you think we should do it? And then let me really run very free. So you got to remember, Nat Geo is a gigantic,
huge.
You know, just their maps alone, like they supply the maps to every public school in the country. Like just that division alone, this is a gigantic company. So that launch was almost de minimis relative to the big company, which I realized, I used to get frustrated theoretically by that, but I realized that was the greatest advantage in the world, because you talked about the more de minimis you are on a relative basis, the more they're just going to leave you alone, because it's like, look, if you make it into something, great. But if it doesn't work, great. It doesn't really kill us from a business perspective. So I was very lucky on that side of things. Like, so that experience really energized me. And then I talked about it before, it gave me that confidence. So I knew I had, like, I knew I had the thought process and the intelligence. But then did I have the ability to take that and manifest it in reality? Because a lot of people are really good talking theoretically. Do they have the will and determination and confidence to get people to follow them, to get outsiders to believe? And I don't just mean investors, but I mean initial advertisers. I mean audience people, right? Like consumers. So like those 4 years of training wheels at Nat Geo gave me the confidence to enact a great deal of my very differentiated experience and thought process.
And then we're talking about mindset, right? So you prepared yourself to be there. I think a lot of people I think you have so much examples of people who are working in the corporate world, but they want to be that entrepreneur.
So quick story, like it's important, right? So I go to my dad. My dad was a UPS driver, right? Like delivers packages. And I go to him and I'm like, hey, I have this opportunity. I was making a lot of money at Nat Geo, by the way. I was doing exceptionally well. I was not killing myself. I had a lot of leeway and creativity. And I worked for this big brand, and my dad was considerably older than me. And I said to him, I'm like, I have this opportunity to make a transition.
Yeah.
And his first reaction is, he goes, number one, if I was you, I would never do that because you're set. And he's like, I've never been set my whole life, right? So you have to think about the context.
100%.
He goes, however, my dad turned everything into a challenge all the time, right? He goes, well, you think you're one of the smartest people in the world. Now I'm like, and he's exaggerating now, right?
Yeah.
But he's like, you think you're so smart. And I'm like, I think I'm pretty good. And he goes, well, prove it. He goes, take your shot. Now you have no backing. You have very little capital. You have no help or advisors that are you have no brand overhang.
Yeah.
Like, you have to go build this.
Yeah.
And if you think you're so smart, take the shot. And he's like, I can't say it on camera, but he's like, don't pee out on this, right? And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, he's 100% right. My trepidation wasn't that in the ability, but I was being fearful of proving that I'm not as good as I think I was. And that's a big a big part of entrepreneurship that doesn't get spoken about. The confidence aspect. And that was a big leap for me because but if I didn't have that conversation with him, I wouldn't have come into the business like gangbusters.
But what do you think? Because you had the confidence, but I think for a lot of people, they don't have that. They still have that fear, or maybe don't think.
We all have. Everyone has imposter
But what
syndrome.
kind of advice do you have for those kind of people who are in the corporate job, want to be an entrepreneur? What is that?
So think about it this way. You think about. Okay, that's actually a great question. So in a corporate job, most of your problems are solved through the systems. And there's very tight parameters around it. Those are not indicators on whether or not you're going to be a great entrepreneur or not. You know what is? When you have an anomaly of a challenge that comes up, and is your first step to go to the systems, what is comfortable, what's in place, or is your first step to be incredibly creative about that, to break the systems that are in place and solve it? Because everybody and their brother wants to be a CEO, and everybody and their brother wants to be a founder. First of all, be careful what you ask for. Has never been in a better phrase. But taking that away, if you are not somebody who instinctually wants to break that mold to solve that problem, as much as you might think you want the optics of it, you do not have the approach that is going to be effective. Because most entrepreneurs are going into things without real blueprints. You have a direction, and you might have a model, and you might have projections, but you have nothing.
You get so much things, right? What get thrown at you, and the resilience what you need to have as an entrepreneur in the safe corporate world. That's, from my perspective, a huge difference.
So let me say it this way, right? I have this phrase that I use. In fact, I think you called it out last time we were having breakfast in Santa Monica. The world, business these days, is more ambiguous than it's ever been before. So my viewpoint is weak people use ambiguity as an excuse to fail. Strong people look at ambiguity and go, there's a million ways to win.
Love that.
And that, to me, is the delineation between somebody who should be an entrepreneur and somebody who's not going to be a good entrepreneur.
That's it.
Ding dong.
Love that. Back to the entrepreneurial. So you met your business partner, you're still working, your dad said, let's go, give it a try, you're smart, you can do this.
Well, he was not quite that supportive. He was more challenging around it,
but it's good for you. I think you can have it, right? You think, okay, let me show.
He knows me well enough that I react better to the challenge than the petting.
Same here. So what next? So
we go and we start, and first of all, I realized quickly that they are a clothing company. This is Echo, the Rhino, 1972. And they have a great want to launch this, to be this effective magazine. And the concept is correct, right? The concept of a whole bunch of niche verticals that are incredibly related. Sneakers, style,
Yeah.
hip hop culture,
Yeah.
hip hop music,
Yeah.
right? Shopping and men's style that is going to be much more urban and street influenced, right? So all this sounds done now, but in 2002, that's not so obvious. And I was like, okay, here's my vision for it. And they were like, okay, so there's not a lot of money to go do this, right? Because again, we were a small LLC off of the larger corporate
Just
entity.
with you and your business partner started an LLC.
So yeah, they started an LLC of Complex.
Yeah.
Complex LLC.
Yeah.
Under the Echo umbrella.
Okay.
Right? So obviously that business was growing like this, right? So by 2006, 2007, they had gone over, I believe, over $500 million
All right.
in like hoodies, t-shirts,
Yeah.
you know, the Echo.
Yeah.
And we had established this magazine, you know, a two-sided magazine, one side buyer's guide, the other side culture and music. So by the way, that was like a Japanese influence. Like nobody was really doing the two-sided things. We were very different in every way. We were different in the topics we covered. We were very different in the tone that we had because we were unabashedly and unapologetically hip hop. And hip hop, not just the music, but the attitude of the culture of hip hop.
Yeah.
And there is a big chasm between those two, right? So I looked at it and I was like, it is my job to get the industry, and when I say that, not just advertisers and brands, but the PR people and the consumers themselves, all of those, to understand that all of these things that you think are niche and on the outside are actually at the epicenter of the middle of impact and influence. And I believed that. So we were very effective very quickly. We did some very interesting things early with the magazine, broke even in 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't happen, especially as an independent entity. And at the end of 06, I go, good news, bad news, Seth. I'm like, Seth was more the business dude. And I go, good news is we broke even with the magazine in 3.5.
How much were you doing in terms of revenue? Can you share?
Not a lot. I think 12 at that point.
Okay.
I mean, but we were a small independent magazine, but 12 million.
And how many people?
About 33.
Okay.
So we were a tight team.
Yep.
We weren't overblown like Condé or Hearst or other things like that.
Yeah.
We were a kind of ragtag bunch. Shocking, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so I was like, good news is we broke even. Bad news is I'm not going to start paying you back all of your investment capital, which by the way didn't go over so well. And he's like, why not? And I'm like, look, if we are saying that we are the brand that is defining what is important to youth culture, then we have to not just have the topics covered, but the distribution platforms as well.
Yeah.
And we knew in 06, I mean, we were very early in realizing that newsstands and magazines and just the paper product itself could not be the way we would define ourselves as a business.
Yeah.
We never defined ourselves as the distribution platform. You define it as the impact with that audience, and that's what you're selling, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, we need to transition very aggressively into digital. And I don't know if you remember in 06, 07, you had two large portals that ran the world, AOL and Yahoo.
Yeah.
Then you had nothing in the middle, and then you had a whole bunch of supposedly verticalized ad networks, Glam and other things like that. I don't know how somebody could say, I'm a verticalized ad network that targets women. Oh, you mean half the planet? That's verticalized? But that's not also the way the internet was organized. I realized the internet was organized by topics and verticalized groups.
Yeah.
Now, social hadn't happened yet, so it hadn't, like, the proliferation of those groups had not totally blown up, but the democratization of being able to go on and get as verticalized content as you want, anytime, anyhow, anywhere,
Was not there yet.
was well, it was, but nobody had organized a business around it yet, right? So, I mean, Facebook wasn't around yet. I mean, Friendster and MySpace were, but they were really peer-to-peer platforms at that point, not media companies.
Okay.
And then also, nobody had organized vertical by topic yet, really. And we were like, well, we can go and take all these topics and do an exclusive ad network and get best-in-class voices of all of the best sneaker sites, because I believe in brand over scale.
Yeah.
So all of the best sneaker sites, all the best music, all the best shopping and style sites, all the best culture, right? And we went out and nobody had ever heard of doing that before. And we were able to organize all these verticals, and all of a sudden, we could walk in the door to Adidas, Nike, McDonald's, Verizon, and go, we have a ton of scale that is super focused against these plays with complex as the umbrella over it. That was the ultimate in brand authenticity and credibility. So we have a brand as an umbrella with all these different verticals that gave us a ton of scale to sell without giving up authenticity and credibility. And then organically, I didn't see, that was my concept. What I didn't see is that the proliferation of social networks, soon to come in 08, 09, and 10, would blow up these verticalized groups. So we had the benefit of all of that just exploded the right strategic plays that we made. If you think about it, bloggers that we organized were really the creators of today.
That's awesome. So you were already prepared.
We were well ahead of the curve.
And then, that's awesome. That's brilliant.
Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. It's great that you were able to get it for the magazine into the overall complex and then the verticalized.
Again,
and then
I
be on time for social.
I wish it was more of me going, oh my God, I'm being so strategic with all of this money. It was me going, if we don't make this pivot from a magazine now, we're dead in the water.
Okay.
Again, necessity. Necessity,
still, but
my
you
friend.
Pivoted in the right way.
1000%.
And that's not everybody's doing that. Kodak were doing always, right?
That's right.
They didn't pivot the right way on time. The machine.
Oh, that list of people who didn't.
Yeah, right?
I mean, first of all, we can go down every almost magazine
You have
company.
a lot of those examples.
All the magazine companies.
They didn't pivot on time towards digital, and you did. So,
that's right.
Right? So you did well, so congrats for that. If you go back to the first 3.5 years, I think you mentioned before you break even. What were as an entrepreneur, the things that you learned mentally and also psychology? So I would love to get your thought about that, also for entrepreneurs and the things, how you experienced that phase. It's a difficult phase from my own experience, building 3-4 ventures from scratch.
And you're not dead yet?
Yeah, right?
Right. No, I'm going to say this, and I think you'll agree with me. So on a macro basis, I think this was almost written by an entrepreneur for entrepreneurs. Is that which does not kill you only makes you stronger. I don't know if there is a more apropos phrase than that for entrepreneurs. Because if you do make it through, that level of foundational confidence that nothing can be thrown at you that you can't figure out how to handle and win. Right? Now, however, the time frame of being that original entrepreneur for me, it's a very different time frame than today. And I'm not being that old guy who's whining and with the little violin. But, the world is different now. When in that time frame, and I know for when you started doing some things, you were not allowed to show weakness to your board or your investors. That if you started complaining like I have, I need mental support, I need a coach, I need a mentor, they're like, it's time for a new CEO. So that's it's a different time now, and I'm not like, and I'm glad it's a different time because that there were a lot of situations where you feel like you're. I always say you feel like you're alone with a big heavy chain jacket on that's been thrown in the deep end of a pool, told to get out. And the chains are 7 times the weight of yourself. And it's like, figure it the hell out, and with no assistance whatsoever.
And figuring the rest out. You have a family, you have all kind of other things going on. So that whole package, how do you fix it, right? And how do you manage that mentally?
So when Echo, let's fast forward a little bit to 08, right? So streetwear had declined, the world had just fallen apart, right? Lehman collapsed, market collapsed, everybody was pulling lines of credit. CIT pulled their money from Echo. We ran out of working capital. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go figure out working capital for this business. That I had just gotten married in 07. My first kid was on the way. My first kid had just been born in 08. My wife was pregnant with my second child. Both my parents were in the hospital. My dad was in the hospital, grade 4 bladder cancer, and my mom just had a stroke coming out of a double aortic aneurysm surgery. The world's falling apart. We don't know if money is going to be worth anything. People forget how bad '08 was. And the business was running out of capital. So to say that I was stressed every single day is the understatement of the year. And to say that after that, because we ended up raising capital from Excel Partners and Austin Ventures, 2 AAA firms. I have no idea how we pulled that off, to be honest with you. I often look back and going, I think my ignorance was my greatest tool. Was my greatest tool again, right? But we ended up getting a deal done in '09.
That's amazing.
That gave us the working capital to accelerate, irrespective of Echo's problems.
No, but seriously, I don't want to interrupt you, but
please,
that part in that time, and you were able to close that, please, because you said it's ignorant, but what was it? How did you
Well, you know what's
make
funny?
it happen?
So we had a deal, I'm trying not to blow people up here, but like we had a term sheet with Excel and AV in September of 2008. We got our term sheet in August, and we were like, oh, we're going to get an investment into Complex specifically. The world hadn't fallen apart yet. I believe it was September 14th was the day Lehman blew up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember, it wasn't specific to us, but every single VC in the world pulled term sheets for every company in the world. Like we're either retrading the deal or completely blowing up the deal. And we were just on the precipice of break even as well. And they knew our numbers and everything like that. So the deal got pulled, and I was like, holy shit, well, we just got to keep running the business, right? So we were hand to mouthing it.
How much did you have left? How much runway?
We were, let's just put it this way, we were delaying payables, and we were barely making payroll on a rolling basis. Oh, wow. Now, I'm just being as frank and as honest as you can.
That, yeah.
You have no idea. It was terrible. Because I was not sleeping a lot.
Didn't pay yourself, probably.
Oh, that's a whole longer. That's another.
No, but some people don't know that for entrepreneurs.
No, but what we did is I went to my entire executive team and said, look, we're 38 people as a company right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, we can either continue to operate the business and keep all 38, or we can cut 25% of our staff, our costs, and eliminate those people, but I think we won't have a business left. So you can keep getting your money, you think, but I don't know for how long. I was a little bit more eloquent about it. So I went to the executive team and said, listen, we can take cuts from 40 to 60% ourselves, and we can hold everybody together and continue to operate. Would you be willing to do that? Now look, if we get to numbers and other things, you're going to be made whole and repaid. No promises, but would you do that? Do you believe in us as a team, the vision, and do you trust me? And I didn't expect every single person to agree.
Oh wow!
And everybody did.
Equity in Complex? Those people.
So all of those people did.
Okay.
So like all of those people ended up making a nice amount of money in the whole thing when we eventually redid the cap table and other things like that. But they took they took money off the table and agreed to it.
That's great.
Most of them around 40-45% reduction. I took a 60% reduction in what I was getting paid for not an insignificant amount of time. But the big lesson here, though, is I kept in touch. Like every quarter, I'd check in with Excel and AV. And after 6 months, so that was like I pulled in September. So it was around March/April of '09. I go, here's our performance. I would do a little snapshot. Here was revenue. Here was our goal. Here's where we are. Here's like gross margin, net margin, and audience growth, right? And they're like, oh my God, okay, so like you're 20% over goal. How much did you pull down your numbers after we pulled the term sheet on 09's numbers? And I'm like, I didn't change our projections at all. I didn't lower it for the macro. We're overperforming on a relative basis. And miraculously, that was a very But just being able to say that with that level of confidence showed that,
Okay,
A, I
really?
don't put out numbers that are bullshit.
Yeah.
Number two is we have a real business that is working when the world's falling apart and you're still growing.
Yeah, then it's
And miraculously, they found money and we figured out a way to make an investment.
that's awesome. Can I ask how much you raised?
It wasn't a lot. It was working capital. It was it was just enough for
Just to
working
survive
capital
and-
and survive and make some investments into early stage investments into video. So it wasn't a ton. They took a very large piece of the business for it because much
yeah.
like today,
Okay.
valuations were tamped down. But look, is it better to own 60%
That's what it
of
is, yeah.
you know the
No,
numbers,
for
right?
sure.
Then we wouldn't have had a business. I needed the working
don't
capital.
Be too greedy.
And look, luckily for us, we were able to grow everything big enough so that even though we took a hit on dilution, it was really de minimis. Like when we exited the first time in July of 16 for all cash, no earnout either. Excel and AV made 17x on their money.
Ooh.
And that's a content business. That's not a SaaS. Those
Exactly.
are SaaS
no, that's
returns.
good to put things
Those
in
are
perspective.
SaaS.
Not everybody knows those numbers, but 17x for me, that's
It's off the charts.
Yeah.
For a media brand, not a platform play or
Yeah.
a SaaS play, that is off the charts. And you have to remember, most of my competitors, Vice, BuzzFeed, and Vox, we had built this whole business. So
Exactly. I
this
love
is
that story. I
But
know-
this is a
yeah.
very important point.
Exactly.
Like we had built our whole business on $31.5 million of raised capital.
okay.
31 and a half. Vice has raised over $1.7 billion. BuzzFeed has raised over 1.7 billion, and they're bankrupt. Vice, BuzzFeed raised, I believe, has raised over $600 million, and are having some, unfortunately having some issues. And Vox, I believe, raised close to $500 million as well. So we were outraised by competitors 10 to 12x, and as to date, we're the only one with a successful exit.
No,
where
but Rich,
people made money.
this is huge what you're now throwing out here, right? Those numbers, 31 and a half against the billion.
to exit for 325.
Yeah, but now, of course, I want to know what is then that secret, how is that possible? Because it's not just a 10% difference.
So look, I say this often as well. You want to, when it comes to ambition,
Yeah.
you want to be the most aggressive person in the absolute world,
Yeah.
but not irrespective of execution. From an execution perspective, you have to be twice as intense about execution as you do the
I
ambition.
love this.
That it's a balance, right? And look, we didn't overraise, we didn't overinvest, and we definitely didn't overpromise. We underpromised, underinvested. We had superior strategy and superior execution for a premier result. And that's not a shot at anybody else. I think we looked at things differently. Our solution in innovation was never throwing money at a problem. Our solution of innovation and iteration, whether it was going from formats or distribution platforms, was how, I believe the one thing we never changed were the topics we covered and the tone in which we covered them. But we had we were incredibly protective and consistent with topic and tone. We were never romantic about format or distribution platform, which I think is the right way to think about media. Like it's the only way to think about media.
No, for sure. But
But hold on. When we did all of our iterations, whether it was from magazine, from print to text online, to an ad network to IP, or from text to photo to short form video to long form video, most of my competitors / peers threw money at those problems, raised lots of money. We were like, well, wait a second, what's unique to our brand? How is our brand going to be differentiated? How can we test and prove that? And, you know, unlike everybody else, we didn't try and jump right to television. I believed that we could do some amazing things in YouTube.
Yeah.
So we launched some shows like Sneaker Shopping with Joe
Yeah, yeah.
LaPuma, this little thing called Hot Ones, Everyday Struggle, Pizza Wars, The Burger Show. You know, we could go on and on and on. QB1 on Netflix,
Yeah.
to a man named Scott, the Kid Cudi documentary on Amazon. So it doesn't matter how short form or premium. What we did was always uniquely our brand in our tone and our topic, but we were able to iterate across all those things. And we never did it by deficit financing.
Yeah.
We did it with discipline from a P&L perspective.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, it makes you hold yourself as the CEO and like intellectually, honestly accountable to how the choices you're making. You're not throwing spaghetti up against the wall.
Yeah.
Like, oh, everybody's moving into video, so I need to go raise $40 million to do it. No. I'm gonna find $2 million of profit from another piece of the division to fund what we think directionally are proof points on an MVP basis, so that we can figure out what works for us with our audience to the greatest degree, and then we can throw fire on it. But we'll have fundamental real proof points, not like it's time to go into video. That is a direction. That's not a plan.
No, but this is
not a
huge.
strategy.
No, but this is big what you're mentioning, right? Because this is the reason why we're sitting here, and that you exited the company for such a big amount, and that you're successful. Because also what I'm seeing, as you know, I'm running a fund investing in early stage startups. We're putting average 2.5 million per deal, and we do early stage, right?
That's a lot, though.
That's
a lot for early stage. That's a lot.
That's a lot because
you make fewer bets, bigger ones.
Exactly. We take them from 0 to Series A, but and that's the reason why I'm mentioning it. The first phase, people cannot put money and already start building something because they think they have a great idea. And you see that with a lot of founders. They just start building an app. No. Let's wait. Just do our research, making sure it's part of the strategy. And it's not, of course, exactly the same what you were doing. But the reason why I'm mentioning is you were very thoughtful about where you're putting the money, not raising too much, because that's also what we're seeing. Raising, have all that bunch of money, but still they blew it up and don't make the right decisions, putting that in the video like you mentioned, because they think that's the right choice. No, that's not how it works.
Look, my board member from Excel, Kevin, said the nicest thing to me before our exit. We were in 14 and we had just gone very heavily into longer form video, right? We were doing 11 minutes, right? So like, again, Hot Ones and Sneaker Shopping, all of those were about to be launched in 15, but we made the decision in 14. And, you know, at the end of a board meeting, you break off and have side conversations and whatever. And I said to Kevin, I'm like, are you concerned? And he goes, I'm very concerned about video because we know the amount of roadkill that's been on like on the side of the road from video. Everybody and their brothers tried video, and you know, he goes, he goes, but I'm going to say this to you, Rich. He goes, I worry more on a macro basis, but not on a micro basis, because I've never worked with anybody who I'm going to say this to the degree that I will say this to you, is you treat our money, my LP's money, like it's yours. And he goes, that's why I'm not worried. He goes, also, I think you'll kill someone to be successful. You know, and he's not wrong. I mean, obviously, that's not, I'm being facetious, and I'm being not literal there.
No, of course.
But he knows what I'm willing to do to win. And I do believe, you know, ideally you have that level of pragmatism and an understanding of the model and finances and how to quickly iterate and play around and hedge your bets very well, which is very important. But sometimes you just have to roll up your sleeves, dig in, and pull out the sharp elbows. And
100%.
you know, you have to be able to do all of those things. That's the thing that I think people don't understand. And I look at it from a personal investing perspective is, you know, you have some unbelievably intelligent people who, you know, are a little soft. And I'm like, that's not going to work, because when they're really up against the wall, and it's going to happen not just once but multiple times, this is not
they
going
will
to.
not
They're not.
stand
They're going
for-
to like their hands are going to go up.
Yeah.
It's done.
Yeah.
I don't care how smart they are.
Yeah.
Because you can't always outsmart a situation, a solution, a problem, a
100%.
challenge. And, you know, then there's people who are really scrappy, but maybe they're not as creative from a solutions perspective. Like they might have the current problem solved, but are they going to have the savvy to solve tomorrow's problems?
Yeah.
So, you know, you need a wide swath of capabilities to be an effective entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. I think the resilience, standing there, the creativity. Of course, you need to have a good brain to make, but you don't need to be the smartest. I think that combination of a couple.
I think it's often better if you're not.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm being very direct about myself, right?
No, you have a very bright mind.
Thank you. But I think it's very non-traditional, though. Like, it's not in a traditional book smart way. Like, yes, I'm good with numbers and other things like that, but my opinions or my initial knee-jerk reaction tends to be the anomaly in any room that I'm in.
Yeah, I agree. I think also Michael Rubin, I heard he was talking about the streetwise, right? How
it matters,
how
man.
And the network around that made him to the billionaire that he now is, right? Those kind of.
I mean, Michael is an aberration. He's way smarter than he says he is, number one. I don't know if anybody has a better nose for sniffing out the deal that nobody else sees from a structure perspective, and then the ability to bring in his street smarts to get the deal done.
Yeah, that combination.
So he's the top of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel to a degree that I think very few people understand.
Yeah.
If I had to describe why I think he's successful, it's that.
The deal structure, can you tell me a little bit about how you did it? Because that was also something for me when we are chatting, right, multiple times. I love that part and the selling it 2 times and the whole. Can you tell me a little bit more about?
Well, first of all, the first time we sold, Verizon was in the middle of doing this little thing called Go 90, right? Like it was a phone, turning it sideways, premium video view. A lot of people have tried it since. You know, we had Katzenberg and everybody else try it. Now, Verizon was putting a lot of money into all of those things. One of the big sectors they were looking at was youth culture. Yeah. And obviously there's not a lot of players. There were a ton of players on a longer form video basis, a premium video basis from a female youth perspective, right? YouTube was huge for females. But a lot of the male stuff was very video game oriented, which is not wasn't premium. So we were one of the few people who had a ton of momentum
with all those
in
amazing
longer
shows.
form video and all those series and franchise and very series and franchise oriented, right? Not one-offs. There were a lot of people with scale, but like, you know, we didn't do rubber bands around a watermelon. We did like Hot Ones, the series, Sneaker Shopping, QB1. Like we had franchises and series that were more in the mold of traditional TV from a theoretical perspective to give someone a reason to come back to the same host, to the same type of content, the same type of format. Not just one-offs to chase the virality that a lot of people were chasing, right? So we were having a conversation with Verizon. Verizon had just gotten into a JV with Hearst. Hearst had just put some capital in us in September of 2015. Steve Schwartz was a big CEO of Hearst, was a big backer and believer of Complex. Neeraj Kemlani, who was my partner who got the deal done at Hearst, was the chief investment guy on the larger scale stuff, not the Hearst early stage fund, but later. And they couldn't love our brand more. And we were able to have a conversation with Verizon and going, look, if you're going to spend all of this money, and I mean large scale, 8 and 9 figure per annum budgets to build out like long form content
Yeah.
consistently over these years, and you're going to make that level of dedication to us, then why don't you think about, Hearst is already an investor in us. Maybe there's a way, why don't you end up writing a check to yourself? This way, when that content does exceptionally well,
You're part of the...
you get the money back.
Yeah.
So you're defraying the risk. I mean, I'm leaving out a lot of
No, of course,
a lot of nuance and
yeah.
detail, but I'm just giving you the
Yeah.
arc.
Yeah.
And we were able to come to a very good deal, all cash. That also came along with a large commitment from Verizon that I knew would guarantee not just, so we had the exit for management, we had the exit for our investors, and we had the exit for our employees, right? But what we were able to do is now guarantee that we were going to be able to come on the other side of this and pull Complex through as an IP factory, which I knew was the future of media.
Yeah.
So that amount of capital that was guaranteed to be spent in, to me, was as important as the exit valuation. Do you see where I'm going with that?
For sure.
So we got to play, usually you have to pick your poison.
Yeah.
We got to win on both sides.
But how did you do that? Because they then,
It's the
in the end,
correct
but they
position.
they need to pay you the cash, and they still need to invest to make the shows.
Right,
So,
but if you do the math on an already profitable media venture, it wasn't hard for them to see that they were going to accelerate their ROI. I mean, that's where having a little bit more financial background and understanding
helps.
was not complicated. You know, I mean, look, it was a complicated deal, but the promise, the differentiation of our brand, the proof points that we didn't just have good ideas. We had good ideas that were already being consumed in the millions and millions and millions already. So we had the chops to produce things. We had the diversity of ideas across a great deal of platforms. We had the social marketing power of all of our social handles to be able to point people to this, to consume the content.
Yeah.
We checked every single box you could imagine. And everybody else checked maybe one or two of those boxes. But we checked all the boxes. And we also, because we had not, now here's the other thing. Because we had not raised a ton of capital like other people,
So
we didn't have a valuation that they would cry writing a check.
What was the valuation at that time?
325 million.
Okay.
So my point, like, because we only raised $31.5 million,
that's good. Yeah.
that's a massive exit
Yeah.
on a relative basis versus other people who had already raised $400 or $500 million
that's a
that you
whole
would have had to
difference.
write a $2 billion check for.
Yeah.
That was not going to happen. So I kept myself in the game. Our discipline of not over raising and being also very cognizant of our profits and being very deliberate about how tight we were with our expenditures and the ratios and the margins. That opened up the aperture to do a creative deal.
Exactly.
That wasn't limited by the check size only.
But this is huge also, again, right? For
Big
people,
takeaways.
founders, to listen what you're now describing here, keeping that valuation low and don't raise already too much, because this was the reason why Verizon came in. If you also, so think about that long term and how you, and not just raising, and then also I think always what kind of investors are you bringing on? Are that strategic investors or just cash, right? I think that's, to have Hearst, Verizon, look, it makes so much sense to have those on your cap table and those guys are behind you.
Look, again, I'd love to say that every aspect was perfectly planned.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Some of those things, but you also do have to be aware enough of what an opportunity is.
Yeah.
It's a very non-traditional way we did that deal. It's a very non-traditional way we thought about it. But because, again, we hadn't overraised, so now it wasn't going to take insane amounts of capital to get a good deal done for everybody. Yeah. But also having Hearst already on our cap table. Like the kismet was, right after that, they got into a JV with Verizon. Yeah. Oh, do we look at that and go, oh, that's great, that's cool. Do we just ask Hearst to help us get Verizon's dollars? Or do we think bigger about a larger scale play? And instead of playing checkers the way a lot of other people would, we played chess.
Love that. And the chess, the next step, because you sold it twice. What was your next move?
Well, that was so. Unfortunately, Go90 didn't work out for Verizon. So, after a couple of years, they started divesting of all their media assets. They sold AOL. They closed Awesomeness. Like they had a lot of. We were their only media asset left in their portfolio, and that doesn't make a lot of sense for a gigantic telecom company. So my viewpoint is when they started to become disinterested and that JV was just no longer a point of focus, right? Like Hearst and Verizon still have a fantastic relationship. No surprise, they're two massively professional organizations, one private, one public. But I was like, you know what? Let's read the tea leaves in what's going on macro-wise right here. And I'm like, you have a lot of people trying to organize these categories. SPACs had just come out. I'm like, you know what? Let's have some strategic conversations on a commercial basis and see where they're going to go. We spoke to a lot of the players out there in the industry. Some people started to organize. Ben Lehrer, who was running, what was the group? Group 9, had just purchased Pop Sugar. And then they were having a conversation with Vox. And we were all having conversations with Vice and other things like that. And I had met Jonah, who I was like very impressed with. Jonah's very visionary-oriented person. Got a very interesting way of thinking about audience from a media perspective. And I was like, okay, if he understands audience and scale, and they're more of a platform play, more of a service platform play, and we're more of a brand play, and premium production. Wow, if you put those together, that's a big yin yang. That could be one bigger, smarter, bigger, better entity. And I pitched it to Verizon and Hearst. And look, we had been profitable and we had paid them back for a great deal of everything. And I was like, look, I think there's an idea and an exit here. Hearst, you're already on Verizon's cap table because they had made an investment. They were one of the early seed investors and everything. So they were already on the cap table. And Verizon was already on the cap table because they had just sold HuffPost to BuzzFeed. So I'm like, guys, it's not that complicated. We can be really smart. It'd be very strategic. I had been doing this for 20 years also at the time. And I was tired, to be really frank.
It was the time.
And it's hard running a business, man. And it's hard running a big business that is also constantly iterating, and media is 24/7. And the ad market is very challenging. Proved, my instinct was right that it was going to become more challenging. But we were able to get this deal done. Hearst and Verizon got a lot of their capital and got to ride along with some new stock. And BuzzFeed got to take a shot at a larger media entity, potentially being the organizer. Well, we have yet to see if that's going to work out, but they were able to go public. So we merged with BuzzFeed in the morning and then went public with them through 890 Partners, the SPAC, and reversed into their SPAC. And BuzzFeed went public, and I retired. Not retired, but I exited Complex.
That's amazing.
Into advising and consulting.
Thank you, Rich. This whole journey, right?
It's a hell of a story.
But it's you have so many great insights and the things that you learned as an entrepreneur, as working in the corporate world, your insight, also as an investor, your strategic mind, setting up that structure. That's something what really triggers me. I think that's very that not everybody's thinking that way. Also, how you structure the deals, were disciplined in how you were running the business as a CEO, and building this impact globally with all the amazing shows, because so many people are familiar with.
We took the right shots at the right time. We had very good instinct and very good gut. The people we had producing and contemplating a great deal of these things were some of the most talented people in the world. I'd like to say that I did a great job supporting them and giving them the confidence to leap and be more aggressive than others, knowing that I would be the net to catch them if it didn't work.
Yeah.
And look, we took plenty of shots that did not work.
Of course,
we
that's
spent a
part of it.
lot of
Yeah,
money
okay, but
that didn't work. But we don't talk about those things though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the good thing was we had more things that worked than didn't.
Yeah, that's in the end what matters.
But you know, we were very lucky. We always had a smaller team than everybody else, but we always had leaders and people who punched not just well above their weight, but probably on an unparalleled basis.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do this without amazing people.
No,
You just can't.
no, but that's everything.
That's right.
All right. I think we need to get a little bit to an end.
It's all good.
But I want to thank you, Rich, for your
100%.
time. I really appreciate it. It was great being here, getting your insights.
It's all good.
Yeah. So
It was a lot of fun.
yeah,
You know, I love telling the story on a more raw basis.
Yeah.
Because there's the highlights and the sound bites and the
Yeah.
snippets. The real learnings comes from the specific nuance
Yeah.
and differentiation
Yeah.
of our approach.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me do that.
no, and appreciate. That's what we're looking for also
That's
with
great.
mastery and mindset. Those deeper insights.
Well, I would
the
hardly
things-
call it mastery, but on my part at least.
But
But
you mastered it.
we did some good things.
Yeah, and your mindset, right, as an entrepreneur and how you scale this, I have a lot of respect for that. I mean
you.
that. So thank you again for your time,
100%.
and I will see you soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.